video, I'm going to explain the importance that observation plays in the establishment of your little food forest garden within the first couple of years. So stay tuned. Your little food forest garden, the one that you're making, or the one that you're designing, or the one that you're creating, or the one that you're thinking about creating, is absolutely unique. There's no other garden like it on this entire planet, and it's as individual as you are, because you designed it, or you're making it, or you're thinking about making it. And that's what sets it aside from every other garden. The most important thing you need to consider before you even start this whole procedure is establish a few things, and those things are what type of environment you live in, what type of climate you live in, and what type of soil structure you have. You see, those three things there are as unique as your little garden itself. Nobody has your soil structure, nobody has the environment that you intend on growing your garden in, or you are growing your garden in, and nobody shares the exact same climate. Everywhere is different. So therein lies a little bit of a problem. You see, when you're first starting up, it's very easy to take people's opinions on board and to watch lots of videos and read lots of literature, and that's a great thing. It's a way you start learning and start getting your head around all of this. But what's really important to understand is that nobody's climate is the same, nobody's environment is the same, and nobody's soil structure is the same. And those three things there will dictate what you can and can't grow in your garden. So it's very important to establish those things in the early days and work those things out. Then you can work out what sort of plants you want to start growing. So the idea behind observation is you take a look around, and nobody can tell you how you can grow plants where you live, because as I said in the beginning of this video, everywhere is different. So it's up to you to observe and to take note of a few things as your climatic conditions, your environment, where you're actually creating that garden. Is it in full sun? Is it in shade? Is it on a hill? Does it receive bad winds? Is it hot? Is it cold? All those sorts of things dictate your environment, which is a little bit different to the actual climate. See, observation is a time-based procedure, and you'll slowly start picking things up through observation. As you start establishing your little garden, you'll start working out certain things. So, for example, I live in a subtropical environment here in Queensland, Australia. It gets ridiculously hot. This week, for example, we're expecting a heat wave for about a week that's going to last 39 degrees, 40 degrees Celsius. It's going to be scorching hot with about 95% relative humidity. So it's going to get very hot. Now those are things that I've established over my time here in the last year or so. The second thing I've established is we get very hot, dry westerly winds. And plants absolutely hate dry winds, especially tropical plants. So that's another thing I've established. The third thing I've established is I live on a slope here. So what I've had to create are gardens that catch water, hold water, because all our water here on this property comes from rainfall. Every single skerrick of water that we get for our drinking water, showering, washing, cleaning, and all our irrigation water has to come from the rain. So I have to utilise that water. I have to catch it, I have to harvest it. I can't simply turn on a tap and expect water to come out. So that's another thing I've had to establish in my garden creation, is how I design those gardens to catch that water. Another thing I've established is my soil structure here. It's very poor. I could take this stuff, I could let it dry out, I could add a bit of water, and I could pretty much make pottery with it. Very high clay content. It's ridiculous. So what I've established out of that in itself over time is I have to till that up, I have to introduce organic matter into it, I have to let it rest, I have to introduce more organic matter, and then over time goes on, that tilling process stops and that soil starts improving. Now that's what I've had to do for this particular environment and this particular situation. It doesn't mean that's what you've got to do. You see, I cop a little bit of flack for tilling this soil especially from people from different parts of the world, and a lot of those people have beautiful loamy soil that they can just sink a shovel into. So they don't appreciate me tilling my soil. I simply shake my head at those people. I'm not too interested in what they've got to say, but that's people's opinions and that's fine. But my point of what I'm trying to say is your environment will dictate the procedures that you have to put in place to create soil, to grow soil, and inevitably grow plants. It's a very important thing. So by taking people's opinion on board is a fine, it's okay, there's nothing wrong with it. But it all comes down to you. You're the one growing these plants. I mean, we can take natural models on board, how natural forests grow. But what we've got to understand is these food forest environment aren't being put here naturally. We're putting them here physically. So the plants that go here, the position that those plants will be growing in, and the environmental and climatic conditions that these plants will be growing in is completely up to us. Okay, so that's where it all comes down to being different to natural systems. So what you end up developing over time is a series of methods that basically you create where you live that dictates how you grow your plants. So for example, I'm in a subtropical environment. I can get away with growing tropical plants here quite easily, but I need to do a few things to protect them, especially from the strong winds, and a few other environmental factors. I have to create a little bit of shade in their early days and things like that from the scorching hot sun we get here. But those are things that I've established from my time here. There's no way I could know that just by listening to someone else or reading documentation or anything like that. I'm physically doing it, and through me practically doing these things, I'm learning and I'm establishing certain things that these plants and this garden needs to happily grow. So there's no good for me trying to grow things like, temperate type plants, cold loving plants like apples and pears and peaches and things like that. Even though I'm going to try and grow apples here, little ones that I've grown from seed, and they're growing quite happily now. But what I've had to do is, because they do like a cooler environment, I've had to create shade for them, and I've had to create wind protection. So I've had to put them in a nice little protected area of the garden where they'll quite happily grow. Whether they produce fruit or not, these little seedling trees, I don't know. Only time will tell that one. So the important thing here is you will never know unless you give it a go. And you see, that's why observation is so crucial for the first year or so when you're establishing your little food forest garden. Take note, look, watch and learn. And it'll make life a lot easier for you. Another big thing also is you need to observe what type of pests and weeds that you have where you're growing. These are quite important. See, what I've established here, as far as pests are concerned, our main one here is these little black ants. They're absolutely everywhere, they're shocking. In my first year, what I was doing here was I had everything in rows. I was growing vegetables. There was no perennials here at all, the year before last. So I had all timbers laying around the paths and all on the boundaries and things like that. And unknowingly, what I was doing was providing little habitats for these ants to move in and start creating their nests. And I got an absolute massive influx of these bloody things. It took me a long time to get on control of them. So what I established out of that through observation was I couldn't have anything on the ground as far as timbers or rocks or empty pots or anything like that for extended periods of time. It's just a little home for those ants. So I had to rip everything up that was on the ground as far as the timbers were concerned, rocks, things like that, to stop creating environments for those ants. What those ants do here in particular is they harvest certain other types of insects for food, like scale, thrip, aphids, mealybug, all these little sorts of critters that they harvest for a source of food. So those little critters in themselves aren't really a problem, it's the ants that are harvesting them. So through observation, I've established that I need to get on top of those ants. So without going all chemical warfare on them, I just can't leave anything on the ground here. Now, I can only establish that through observation. Nobody could teach me that, nobody could tell me that, and I couldn't read that anywhere else to learn those things. Another thing is also weeds. You need to establish over time what type of weeds you have. Now, some weeds are good. Weeds are simply a form of organic matter that you can simply pick up and put back on your garden. Some weeds, though, are quite invasive, and if you let them get away, they can become a little bit of a problem. So that's another type of observation method that I've had to put in place here, just to try and eradicate some of these more potentially invasive weeds so they don't take control of my little garden here. Once you start getting on top of those things, it all starts to become really easy, but it's all through the power of observation. So anyway, no matter where you are in this world, have fun growing your little food garden, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.